Good evening and welcome to the Township of Lopatcong Planning Board meeting of August 2018. At this time, I would invite you to join us in a silent moment of prayer, followed immediately by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'm required to state that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975 by advertising a notice in the Star Gazette and the Express Times and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the municipal building.
That should fix it. That thing was a go away now. Okay.
You have to start over?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank God there's a nice.
Roll call, please, Beth.
Okay, members Archesky, Pryor,
Here.
Schneider, Weeks, Mayor Mengucci,
Here.
Vice Chairman Fishback,
Here.
Chairman Van Vliet,
Here.
Alternate Steinhardt, Alternate Clymer.
We have a quorum. Under old business, has everyone received the copy of the minutes of the July 25th, 2018 meeting? Are there any questions, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are passed. Under the old business, we have received a resignation, a letter from member Eric Johnson. He has resigned from the planning board. His spot will remain vacant until so filled. We have under old business also planning board rules and regulations. We put that on usually, and I don't think there's any comment today on it at all. Does anyone have anything? No? Okay. We'll move on to a resolution, I-78 Logistics Park, Block 101, Lots 1 and Lot 1.01, granting amended general development plan approval and amended preliminary and final major site plan approval for Building 7 and access and site improvements.
Mr. Chairman, before we make a motion, can I make a statement on that?
Certainly.
In the original approval of the general development plan, I think it was about 1 year ago, September 2017, we made it a condition that all these approvals were subject to the execution of a financial plan. At the hearing, it was noted that we still don't have one. There's a condition in Mr. Price's resolution that says all previous approvals or conditions remain in force unless changed. And George, I believe in your letter you mentioned something about, was it COA?
Yes, in our review letter we indicated that the application would be subject to a COA fee, as outlined in the redevelopment plan.
Yeah, and COA may or may not involve the financial plan. It's under discussion, so that whole thing is an open issue, and I just want to make that clear that this isn't perfected until, or my interpretation is not perfected until that financial plan is executed.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Pryor, you're right. The only thing that this resolution will do, as far as conditions are concerned, is allow them to undertake certain site work and improvements in advance of meeting all of the other conditions.
Yeah.
But it also envisions some type of developer's agreement as well with the financial that they have to enter into with the municipality for appropriate bonding before they undertake significant additional site work than what we're otherwise allowing.
I think in this case the financial agreement is particularly significant because it is a redevelopment project, and the financial agreement is just an inherent, it's an important part of the whole process, a key part of the process, I'd say.
So you're basically saying that we should accept it so that they can move forward. And Joe, if I got it right, you're basically saying
that we need to stop it.
No,
and get-
no, I'm
get
not.
what we need?
I'm saying that, I'm just making it clear that that's a condition,
The condition must be met.
one more condition.
Is it in writing stating that somewhere?
Yes.
In the original one, and if Mr. Price agrees with me, his resolution is probably sufficient. I'm just putting that on the record.
That is correct.
All right, let's before my.
Yeah, and that's also, the financial agreements are beyond the jurisdiction of this board. We can only just grant an approval or not. But one thing, just to be clear, is that most of the, I'm going to call it the Building 7 improvements, are all subject to the standard conditions, including the financial agreement.
Okay.
That site work for the connector road, the grading, and I believe it's the temporary access, they're being allowed to move forward without that condition being met, and all the conditions, okay?
I got you.
All of the conditions, including the NJDOT approval for their intersection and everything else that we had conditioned
Fair enough.
still remain in effect. So-
That is correct.
Okay. Any further comments or questions on this? I'll entertain a motion to memorialize that resolution.
Well, with that clarification, I'll make that motion.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call, Beth, please.
Members Pryor,
Yes?
Weeks,
Yes.
Mayor Mengucci.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Fishback.
Yes.
Chairman Van Vliet.
Yes.
Steinhardt. Yes.
Okay. Now we'll move on to new business. This is ordinance 18-10, amended chapter 199 of the code entitled Stormwater Management, section 243-40 of the zoning and land use ordinance entitled Preliminary Data, and attachments 3 through 9 within chapter 243 of the code entitled Zoning and Land Use, which contain the various submissions, checklists, and to address new requirements in the township's tier A, municipal stormwater general permit, and the requirements in the township's Highlands petition. Any questions? Longer than we take the vote.
I do have a question for Adam. As I understand it, the changes in permit really don't affect the stormwater master plan. They've added mostly these maintenance requirements to the ordinance.
Exactly, so this places new requirements on existing owners of private stormwater facilities, requiring them to perform maintenance, as they already are required, but now they're required to submit logs of that maintenance to the township to prove that they are maintaining their systems. And then for future systems or future projects to come before the board and before the township, they'll have additional requirements during their design process.
So the township is passing this as an amendment to their ordinance to comply with their new permit.
Correct. The NGDP permit.
So do we have to pass a resolution on that, or
Yeah,
just?
what's before the board right now is a master plan consistency review. So it's the determination of the board whether or not the ordinance as proposed and now introduced by the township council is consistent with the master plan.
Okay, so we have to determine.
And if you do vote to do that, I did provide you with a resolution so you can vote to make a determination as to consistency or inconsistency. If you find it to be consistent, you can then adopt the resolution tonight so that you can give that to the township council and they can go ahead and have their public hearing and vote on it.
Thank you. Does everyone have a copy of that resolution? It's reviewing, finding, and finding ordinance 18-10 consistent with the master plan.
George, I think it's right, although it's in yeah, well, read
Give
it
everybody a minute to read it.
as introduced by the council.
Oh, we're good.
I should have put it in bold format.
Okay, you're right.
I didn't hear what was going on down there. Are we all right?
Yeah, you know what, there is just a question, if you look at the top in the first whereas recital clause, it says the township council, the township of Lopatcong.
Yeah.
Usually that's the board,
It's usually the board.
so we just want to make sure that it read properly, Mr. Pryor, and it does, so
Okay.
it's just formatting.
Further questions or comments? Okay, in that case, I'll entertain a motion to memorialize the,
I'll move for the adoption of
Okay.
proposed ordinance number 1810.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Beth, roll call, please.
Members Pryor.
Yes.
Weeks.
Yes.
Mengucci.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Fishback.
Yes.
Chairman Van Vliet.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
Sir, your resolution has been adopted.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
You're welcome to stay.
I'll be back tomorrow.
Also now under new business, we have a public hearing on the master plan housing element and fair share plan. I guess, George, you would be the one to do that for us, if you could?
Yes. As part of our settlement agreement in terms of addressing the affordable housing obligation for the township, one of those activities is for the board itself to review a new housing element and fair share plan that addresses how we are going to meet our basically our housing obligation in the township and how we actually have responded to the actual obligation that we have for round 3 going forward. Essentially what we're trying to address is a round 3 obligation of 152 units, which are broken out as a rehabilitation share of 3 units, prior round obligation of 56 units, and a prospective need that's 1999 to 2025 of 93 units. And what the reports try to do is go through and give a little bit of the history. The housing element itself gives you a little bit of history of the township in terms of what type of housing is there, the history of development in the town to a certain extent, current pace of development in the town, and then gives a very general overview of the sewer and water situation in the town to serve new development, and looks at the town in a very general sense. The fair share plan portion of this, which is in a second report, looks at and tries to specifically describe how we've met our obligations and what we are going to do moving forward for the rest of the 3rd round period, that is till the end of the 3rd round, which is 2025. Just to give you the housing element, as I said, is pretty much just a general overview, and I don't think it's a need to go into it into a great deal of different detail, but I think some of the interesting things that is in the housing plan, housing share element, that has been picked up since the last one we did, is really just the trends that the town has gone through over the last period, actually from 2000 to today, 2018. And the biggest thing that has become apparent in doing the analysis is that essentially there's the amount of housing starts in the community has seen a severe drop, which you're all probably familiar with. But it sort of came out to me as a little bit of surprising. From the period from 2000 to 2006, the town was adding housing units at about a rate of 154 a year, which is actually a fairly substantial pace. From 2006 to 2014, which is the period we have, which overlaps the end of the recession and coming out of the recession and moving forward, that pace had dropped down to about 45 a year. So the pace of development in town for housing has dropped almost 70% during that period through the development. The other thing that became apparent is that in terms of development going forward, and this is in the housing element itself, is that most of your future development for housing is going to be the filling out of the multifamily projects that have been approved, Autumn Ridge, Sycamore Landing, and that the opportunity to do relatively large single-family developments is pretty much past. Most of the parcels in town have been developed, or they're located in your density housing districts beyond the center. So the pace of housing is probably going to change and slow down over the period of time between now and 2025, with more emphasis on multifamily housing as reflected by the plans the board has approved. The other interesting thing that came out in looking at some of the data is that also, which I think is going to change a little bit, is actually jobs and employment in the community between 2000 and 2013 and 2016. There's been a substantial drop-off in employment, which you probably also have a sense of, but we've basically gone from a private sector employment of about 582 people down to about 409, and government employees have basically dropped also from about 199 to 184. So there has been a decrease in jobs, private jobs of about 29%, and government jobs about 7.5%, which obviously with the development of the Ingersoll tract, we're probably going to see a pickup in development, though the high cube warehouses tend to not employ a great deal of people. The types of numbers we might see there is pick up several hundred. As that develops, there might be the chance to pick up 100 to 200 employees at that site.
George, these figures you're quoting, they're for jobs within the township limits?
That's correct. We got these out of various publications that we have down there. I'd have to look up the source, but that's what we got as covered jobs within the township. And I guess the only other thing that is of interest in there that, and again, something you're all aware of, is the main limiting factor to development, future development in the town, is really the availability of sewer gallonage, which really caps almost any intensive development, both for residential and obviously for further development within our industrial districts. So we're beginning to come up on that as one of the main reasons that development will basically stall in many ways, because you just won't have the public infrastructure to support it, particularly sewers. That's just a quick overview of the housing element. It's more a background than anything else to the fair share plan, which is probably most interesting for everyone here this evening. And in terms of the fair share plan portion of this, and that is how do we meet our obligation, our affordable housing obligation. As I had indicated, essentially our obligation has been established at 152 units. The township, as of today, has credits that would equal 158 units. So the first thing that we should be aware of is the township currently has enough credits to meet its obligation for the 1999 to 2025 obligation period. In fact, we have a few more units than is required. I don't know if you want to go into this, but I can actually give you the credit breakout, which developments in town are providing what. I don't know if that's something you want to see the detail on. But to suffice it to say, the way the obligations are put together, the town has three types of obligations. One of them is essentially rehabilitation. That's bringing houses up to code. The second one is a prior round obligation. That's new construction that was put in between 1987 and 1999. And then prospective need is your obligation going forward to the year 2025. The township in this number has a rehabilitation share of 3 units. That is being met by new construction in town. In other words, the township used to have a rehabilitation program. It has since been closed down, and it does not have to be started again. Essentially, we will be able to meet our rehabilitation obligation of 3 units actually through new construction, which is what we're allowed to do in terms of counting. Prior round obligation of 56 units. We have obviously the units necessary to provide that, and we can and will meet that obligation with new construction. Prospective need is 93 units. Based on the housing that's built in the township to date, we actually have 99 credits, which means that we have a surplus of six credits that'll be carried forward. That's without any of the plans that the town has looked at to date. As an example, for Autumn Ridge, the one that you have approved, that when it comes online will be in addition, the 40 units that they're constructing. Also, several years ago, you approved, you didn't, the zoning board granted a use variance to provide the conversion of the school to 8 apartments with 1 affordable unit. That will also be carried forward, so you're up to 41. So that essentially going forward, you'll be carrying on the books a total of, let me make sure I got the number right. You have a surplus of 6, you have Autumn Ridge, which is 40, Delaware Park is 1. So going forward, at the end of 2025, the township, if it does nothing in that period, will be carrying a surplus of 47 units into the 4th round. And along with this, we have to talk about how we're going down. Oh, I should point out that obviously the town collects development fees, and you've been collecting fees for years. And that goes into part of the spending plan and also how that money is going to be used going forward. Obviously, part of this plan is how you're going to spend or use those resources to promote affordable housing. And there's several ways that the town can and will operate under. First of all, there's called affordable assistance, which is a mandatory requirement that at least 30% of the funds be used for assisting those that are in affordable housing, for rental assistance. And what they're saying there by that is a program where, for example, if you have affordable housing units and you have one home that's available for moderate income, and then you have an individual that's very low income, and they can't afford to move into the unit, the rental assistance program is to provide them with funding that they can actually, the difference between what they can afford to pay and what that rent would be, they can have assistance on that if they apply. So we have a rental assistance program that's being proposed. The other part of the affordable assistance is for security deposits. Let's say someone meets the financial obligations, can afford to rent the property, but doesn't have the 2-month security deposit. What this is a program where the town, in essence, would provide the security assessment to that individual, who then can use that while they stay in the apartment or house. And when they go to leave, the owner of that property then has to send the money back to the township so it can be used again. And any difference that's taken out of the security deposit for damages and that kind of thing, the individual who rented it has to make good on. So it should be a revolving fund, in essence, that's being set up and run through. But that's one of the things that we could do and carry forward. The other aspect of it is to administer this whole program, the town's allowed to set aside 20% of the money for actually administration of the various programs. What is interesting is that the township is fortunate that you're going to have probably a very large surplus going forward. And to give you an idea on that, the fund currently has about $205,000 plus in the fund as it stands today. The projected income, and this is income as a result of some of the industrial, as an example, the plastics company, it also includes in there an estimate of income that will be coming from bridge development if they ever go ahead. But we're projecting that the fund over between now and 2025 could have an income sitting around $915,000. if you look at it from purely a breakout of what's required, 30% of that would be for affordable assistance, which is about 261,000. And administration would be 20%, you'd be setting aside about 117,000. That leaves more than $500,000 available as basically I hate to call it a slush fund, but what it is a fund that you will have available to use for projects that you can identify between now and 2025. So you will have about $500,000 available that you could use for rehabilitation. If someone came in and wanted to do it, you could use it to support the conversion to accessory apartments. And you could also maintain a certain part of that for supportive and special needs. And what that is really, if you have a nonprofit group that wants to come in and wants to do a group home or something that the town wants to support, there would be a money available to help them get into the building of that. So the town is very fortunate in the sense that it has met its obligation, it can meet its obligation going forward. You'll have a surplus. And not only will you have a surplus of units moving forward, you actually should have a fairly good, substantial fund available to promote and carry forward affordable housing opportunities in the town. And the process that you're looking at here tonight is that we're looking now, hopefully, and I'll try to answer any questions you have, that the board could approve the housing element and fair share plan. The spending plan, which I just gave you a very quick overview of, is actually a function of council and would be sent up to them for their review and approval. Once those three aspects are done, that would go back to the courts then, hopefully, to close the books on compliance and hopefully get a certification from the courts that we've met our obligation and basically can proceed with closing the books on the third round of co-op. That's a very quick overview. If you have questions, go ahead and shoot. Or
I did have a few, George.
Yeah.
Something like Sears, obviously, that's going to be redeveloped. We would get more funds out of that.
Yes. The one thing I forgot to mention is obviously basically you have, which will carry forward your fee ordinance. So any development that comes into town, if it's residential but does not include affordable housing, they will be subject to the 1.5% fee of the assessed evaluation that they would pay, and that would go to the fund. Commercial industrial development is 2.5%, which was set by the state. So as we move forward, and some of that revenue was estimated into what we put into the spending plan for council's consideration. But anything that comes in, even ones that we didn't think of here or that we don't even have a knowledge that they're going to happen between now and then, would be subject to the funds. That fee ordinance is currently on the books and will stay on the books.
I guess the other question I have, something like that strip mall on Strikers where it was a bunch of small stores and now it's going to become medical office buildings, but the structure's not going to change. St. Luke's, I guess, going to take it over. Would we get something out of that, or no?
This deals with new construction.
Just new construction.
Simple conversion of a building will generate more funds. If they all of a sudden expanded it and the assessed evaluation would go up, yes, you'd get it on what was expanded. The extension. But no, if it's just switching over one, and it's the same building, they supposedly paid it once.
Yeah, although it is a change in use, I guess, or whatever, but.
Afraid not.
All right.
But like I say, it's very fortunate. The township is going to be in good shape going forward. You're going to not only have a surplus of units, but you're going to have a surplus of cash to deal with. And the spending plan that we put forward is very conservative because, and I'll be very frank with you, the reason is that we did not want to overestimate the funds you were going to get because you don't need the money for programs right now. You met your obligation, yet in the spending plan, we have to come up with reasons of how you're going to spend it. So if I pump up the numbers, for example, and estimate really high, it's actually you're binding yourself into a program that, one, you may not collect the money and be able to fund it, or two, we'll go back to the courts with a huge dollar number that just says, well, it's here and we have intent to spend it, but we haven't figured out how. Because
I have one more question along those lines. Something like Habitat for Humanity, would that be a valid?
Yes, because we, even in the spending plan that we have suggested to go to, up to council,
Yeah.
there's we have left in there a little over $378,000 for supporting needs. So if a Habitat came in and said, we want to build this unit, we'll agree to all the restrictions on the unit, but gee, we'd like 50 grand or whatever it is to help, you have the money available that you can
Yeah,
invest in.
I just want to say as the council representative, I would rather promote ownership than,
Yeah.
rent, like people that have little skin in the game and enjoy being an owner. And that would consume the money, rather than run around with this pot. It would consume it for a very valid, constructive purpose, so.
Right, and what
I'm
we
sure we'll be discussing
Well, yeah, and what we've
council.
said in the spending plan is that we've listed these things that you could invest in, but we don't actually have a project, right?
I get you.
That's really what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
But it gives us flexibility in the future. If the project does come to us, we can spend the money pretty much where we want to, as opposed to being locked into something right now.
Well, right, and actually, if we moved it up into a column of a project you're going to do, then somebody would actually expect it to happen. Here you're saying that we have the money, we're gonna look for projects, these are the kind of projects we want, but we're not saying that 3 years from now, you're gonna have another 10 houses over on this corner, that kind of thing. And I think that's probably the best way to play this at this time. But we also broke it into a few categories so it gives you some options, because supposedly the money in the Affordable Housing Trust, not supposedly, actually, the money in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is supposed to be spent only on items in accordance with the plan. So if all of a sudden you came up with a wonderful project you wanted to fund and you have money for it, but it isn't listed here, in actual practice, you're supposed to amend that plan. And I'll toss this back to our attorney, since this is no longer with COA. The way that used to work, it worked very well under COA. You just simply informed them what you were going to do, the restrictions you were going to put it on it, sent it up to them, and they wrote back and said, your plan's amended. That's while they existed. Well, now that it's in the courts, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah,
how
I don't
this
know if
works.
that's been addressed yet, how you actually get that amendment, I guess, ratified, and if court approval or blessing would be needed, with notice to all of the interested parties, which of course would include Fair Share Housing and everyone else.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either,
Under the new system.
unless it's already taken care of by virtue of the settlement agreement.
Well, we've taken care of our settlement agreement, but the excess funds.
No, that have modified.
Oh, okay.
That may
I
be
don't
addressed,
recall
but I'm not familiar
I don't.
with the settlement agreement.
But that's a bridge that we can address if and when we have it. While COLA was ineffective over the last many years, the way amendments were approved was a phone call, and they said, yeah, that sounds good. And that was it. That's how it was operated on new projects for about the last 10 years. But I'll be honest with you, in one of the other towns I have, we did 5 or 6 projects using that method. We have nothing in writing or approval, but that's how it was done then. Yeah, the documentation's there. I mean, we're not worried about it, but it's something that may have to be addressed in the future. But like I say, I think the township's fortunate with where it is now compared to many communities that are struggling with this.
Bruce, do you feel, and I realize it's only 7 years away, 6 years away, 25th, all right, do you feel when we get that 25th year that the town will be in top of the line condition, or are we going to have to struggle to come up with things to, you know,
Well, given the history.
well, I know it's a history you can't pick out.
Oh, no,
I'm asking, yeah.
I think in the end, you're gonna need more than the surplus that we have.
That's what I'm asking.
If COA, or if the numbers are calculated the way they have been over the years and through all the court gyrations, I don't see the obligations going down.
Okay.
In other words, your obligation now for,
Even if our growth slowed down.
well, I think that'll help.
Still,
I think one of the things that has benefited Lopatcong is you actually do have a broad range of housing, which when you run the computer model actually helps you because it says more of your units are affordable than a lot of towns. And your numbers tend to stay a little bit lower, substantially lower than some of the other towns I've worked with that don't have the broad range of, they have a mix of housing, but they don't have the price differentials you have, or the variety. But I would say that, you know, if this period you came up with 93 units as prospective need, my guess is when they run the numbers again in 2025, the number's going to be hanging around 90.
well, I know, I understand who knows, but what I was trying to get at is it something we should work on and, you know, require certain things to be able to make sure we're there
Well,
when we get there, not scrimmaging around like, you know, again, of, hey, we need to find this, we need, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, we just gotta put it here.
Well,
I don't
think
wanna just put it here, I wanna know where it's going.
I think you have the money, and I think it's important that over this remaining period, that the town remain active in trying to encourage it. There are a lot of ways to do it. Obviously, the most efficient way compared to doing inclusionary housing, which you only get 20% affordable out of it, is that if you can partner with nonprofits, if you can build, because then you do it by bed count. There's a lot of ways to cut it up and do it, but I would say that, yes, you shouldn't just put this on the shelf and say.
That's what I was trying to say.
That, you know.
Keep active.
Yeah, I think keep active,
Places to go.
and you try to create some opportunities. All it is, you don't have a gun at your head to absolutely pound out these units. So yes, I would not put it totally on the back burner.
Okay.
I think personally, I'd like to thank George for the number of years that we've been involved in this, since '94, I think, when Laurel first came in.
Yes.
And we were working through this, and I've been around about 20 years on the planning board, and we negotiated our way through it very nicely.
Yeah, I think
We always were within striking distance of meeting our obligation or exceeded our obligation. One hitch that came up was when the state wanted to confiscate all the funds.
Take the money back.
Take the money back that we had accumulated and, you know, still enforce us with doing other things, but we negotiated around that nicely. So I really, you know, I think a lot of the credit of where we are today sits right there with that gentleman.
Well,
So,
I appreciate that, but I will also say that in support of the town is actively engaged in providing the housing. You have addressed it, you've stood up there and approved the affordable projects, the inclusionary projects, and you've tried to address it, which is more than I can say for some towns. So the fact that we were able to meet it and get ahead also goes with this board and your township council, quite frankly. I mean, your willingness to address this is really what got us here. You know, like I say, if you weren't willing to do that, it didn't matter what paper I shuffled.
I have a question. I'm trying, this is something I'm trying to familiarize myself with, because I'm not too familiar with how it works. But does the township, does it have an obligation to actually build a housing itself, or is it like private entities coming in and building it to meet our regulations and numbers?
You have an obligation to try to provide this housing. It can be done through zoning, which means the town doesn't really just zone. It can be done through nonprofits, through basically supporting their development. But the town has the official obligation to come up with a plan of how they're going to meet it. And this happens to also be part of a court settlement, I mean, which is, we had an objector in here that, quite frankly, we settled with and got 40 units out of it, of just private investment providing a 20% set aside, which, by the way, is being applied to the next round, but we didn't need it for this round, quite frankly. But it is an obligation. As an example, the spending plan, the fine print on the spending plan says that the township council approves this, but if the revenues don't meet my projections,
We still gotta pay for
the
it.
town has to still pay for it. So, I mean, there is a little bit of a hammer sitting there that involves the town, that they could be stuck with it.
So a private entity could come in and build the housing, but the township is responsible for everything?
Well, the township is responsible for meeting the number. If you zone for it, then the township doesn't have to have any money involved, it just would have to zone for that number. But if there's programs that are in it, like rent subsidies, the thing that I mentioned, that 30% of it has to be spent, the town's on the hook for spending that money.
Well, Piazza Track is part of that.
That's part of the settlement.
That'll be part of the settlement, all
I
right?
can tell you a little bit more about it, too.
Yeah. I've been like doing some.
There are some towns that actually do have housing authorities that actually build housing.
Yeah.
Phillipsburg is one of them.
That
So,
is-
I mean, one of the things that we were concerned of from day one was the fact that as a small community, I don't think we could have afforded to have a housing authority within our township.
Because don't housing authorities have different regulations they have to meet than like a private entity coming in and building them? They have different numbers and different percentages? Okay.
Yeah,
A lot of it comes under
Income-based,
HUD,
income-based.
federal
Right.
supervision as it would be coming in.
And some of these programs can be managed by the town. Beth can go into it, but the town managed the rehabilitation part of this under the last round and took care of that. I think the county qualified them and then qualified them income-wise, and then the town handled the actual setting up the program, who got in, taking care of the paperwork. So there can be all kinds of partnerships there. I will say that under many of the agreements that are being cut with Fair Share right now, even where there's nonprofits involved, some of those agreements have been, nonprofit agrees to build 10 units in town, and Fair Share has been, as part of the settlement, saying that's okay, but if they don't build them, the town will. That's actually been part of the settlement agreements in several towns. Or the town will get 10 units from this group, but they'll put up $500,000. I mean, there's been some real dollars tossed around in some of these.
We used to, how many years ago was that? That they had, where you could come in and they would, like, put a new furnace in for you, or...
Well, that's the
Or kids really had
rehabilitation.
it, get away with that.
That's
is that correct?
rehabilitation.
Don't
That was the
exist
stimulus, that was under the stimulus, federal
Well,
stimulus.
that is also a program the town ran.
Right.
And you still can. The COLA provides that you can provide up to 10,000, as a minimum, up to $10,000 in rehab money. If somebody comes in and qualifies, they can get the money, new furnace, new roof, bring the house up to code.
Didn't HUD have a similar program?
Well, I'm not gonna touch that one.
There were federal programs that would allow you to do things, and the first thing you had to do to the house was bring everything back up to code.
Back up to code.
And then if there was money left over out of the grant, then you could do other things. But, you know, roof, electrical.
Electrical, furnace.
Right, furnace, stuff like that.
Necessities, right.
And in the program, we've left that option in here. If the town wants to start that again, they can. It's not necessary, but they can. We put money specifically in here for that, if they want to do it. The same way with accessory apartments, we put money in here for if you wanted to assist people to renovate an accessory apartment for affordable housing. The town can contribute up to $20,000 toward that if they wanted to. Again, it's not mandated in here, it's just here if you
Gives
want
us
to start.
another option.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I tried to put those options in loosely only because I didn't know how you'd amend the plan later. I wanted them listed in here so that you could sort of pick and choose as you go forward.
I think that's a good option to take, to give us as many options as we possibly can. We can always go forward and attempt to amend it.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and if you have more revenue come in, you can expand your program.
That's one of the other things that we want to, hopefully the board will agree to adopt this tonight, because we're under a kind of a deadline from the courts to adopt the fair share housing plan by August to get going, I guess.
Yeah, we want to go back to our conformity hearing before the courts, coming up September, sometime in September, which hopefully will get us that part of it done. Then we'll be out and done and finished.
And what we're really doing here is recommending to council that we've approved it and passed it, and then they won't have to adopt the new ordinance to go with it. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, yeah, you're going to hopefully do a resolution tonight adopting the housing element and fair share plan.
Amending the master plan.
Amending
The master plan, right?
The council then will hopefully, and again, this gets down to how, I don't know how procedures change exactly with the court, the township council would then normally, and jump in here if I'm going off the deep end, but the township council would normally adopt a resolution essentially recognizing that they support your housing element fair share plan, and then they would actually adopt a spending plan. And then that would all be packaged and sent up normally to COLA, but it's going to go to the courts.
Yeah, George, I'm not 100% sure about what I'm going to say, but if I'm not mistaken, the numbers are the numbers. They've been negotiated, they've been through the courts. There's really not much you can do to unwind that without messing up the whole thing. And I think one of the conditions of the, it's not a mediator, where they call him the master. They wanted the settlement incorporated in our master plan.
Correct.
So this is all very mechanical today. It's fair. It's taken place over a long time. As I understand it, we were one of the first to settle, and having been involved in this, the first numbers I saw were humongous. This is a very, very very fair settlement. So as the council representative, I would encourage the board to, approve this, and let's all move forward.
Yeah, the numbers have come down considerably. Fair share originally was standing in front of us telling us we had an obligation of more than 200 units, pushing 300, which obviously they've agreed to this lower number. This is the number they've agreed to now to let us go ahead.
Any further questions? All right, John, do you have a question? We'll open it to the public for comment.
Yes.
The Affordable Trust Fund is totally for building of these types of situations, housing.
That's correct.
It can't be mixed with anything else.
It's supposed to be used exclusively for affordable housing, that's correct.
Okay. Now, the restoration funding, which can be used for refurbishing housing.
That's correct.
That can be used can that be used in apartment areas?
Well, it's to bring
more units
up to code.
Up to code.
As long as you're income qualified. They have a whole set of qualifications, and then you can get enough money to bring it up to code.
Okay, now the other thing is that it is true that there's a difference between housing authorities and housing agencies. They work differently with some of the regulations, so there is a difference. And The other question is, you mentioned something about a 20% security deposit. What was that referring to? Because I was under the understanding that with the maximum that could be charged in New Jersey was 1.5 months security.
No, I'm sorry. We're allowed, the town is allowed to spend 20%
Yes.
of the affordable housing funds on
Okay.
administration.
Okay, I see.
The security deposit is really a program to assist people. When I said 2
Oh, I
months,
see.
I'm
I see.
sorry, I'm thinking of Philadelphia. That's normally what you have to put up in Philly. No, this is, whatever the law allows in terms of security deposit, this is to assist people to meet if it's
To
1
meet the
month, it's
security,
1 month.
to meet that.
I said 2, because that's,
And that's what it can be in that trust fund.
and that
Taken
can
from
be
it, can be
funded
utilized
out
from
of
the
the trust fund, and it's normally set up as a rolling account. In other words, you spend the money, when the person leaves that unit, the owner of that unit refunds the security deposit
Yes.
back to the town,
Yes,
and if he takes money out of it because the guy trashed the apartment,
yes.
the guy that's leaving has to make up the difference.
And then that's town specific. It's not anything outside of the town.
That's right. Well, it's town-specific, and it's only applicable to already affordable units that have been
Okay.
set aside.
Okay, okay. And then, just one other question, which is, I don't know the answer to, and I don't know if this is an appropriate thing to ask, but I know that just recently council has adjusted some type of situation with Sycamore Landing, being able to primarily build regular, I'll call it regular because I don't know what you really call it, regular construction housing over there and regular rental level housing.
No, I can address that.
Yeah, okay, Joe.
Yeah, the number of units, the number of low-cost units haven't changed. In their development agreement, the idea was to try and bring the low-cost housing units online throughout the building process.
Yes,
And they got behind, and it had to do with the way the buildings were laid out. There were some delays and some, units, the whole building, and so on. So what we did is, we let them delay them. They're not forgiven. They're gonna finish the building they're working on, and then these things will come on a little later than the original schedule laid out.
now the next question is, are they required to finish their development? Or could they dump it at the end?
People go bankrupt, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I said I'm not
Refer to our attorney
I
there.
mean, outside of going bankrupt, there's, I mean,
Yeah, that's a difficult question. Generally, developers are going to want to try to finish it.
okay,
Performance guarantees will not generally guarantee the completion of a development.
all right, but they.
They're renting when they open. I mean, there's people lining up there to rent, so I can't see that
And
going
they
on.
couldn't change those, they couldn't change the 40 or 47, whatever's in there.
Now, the number of units was prescribed by COA, and there's so many low-cost 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom, and they're going to be held to that number. That didn't change.
All right, Joe, okay. Thank
The
you,
other
Mr.
thing is
President.
that in our agreements, and I know they got behind, there is an actual pace. In other words, if they build, the first 10% of the units can be market rate, the
Yes.
second 20%, they gotta build a certain percentage of the affordable. We actually have a schedule in here that as an example, Alderman Bridge will have to follow to guarantee that the affordable units come online along with the market units, so
Yes.
we don't get the risk of the guy building all the market rate units and then declaring bankruptcy and walking away at the affordables. We have our law, our schedule here actually establishes how they have to do it.
Okay, so now the council has given the opportunity to Sycamore Landing to push us off to the end.
Well, I don't know if it's.
No, it's one, it essentially involves like completing one building and then,
Go to another.
It doesn't have to just
Yeah.
be like checkerboard, like just one and then another and then one.
you know how they build a unit, they got so many units in a building, and they got delayed with a building, and that prevented some of these from coming on, and they want to finish the building they're doing and get the units rented, and they'll catch
If I
up.
remember correctly, they were supposed to have the affordable units spread throughout Sycamore Lane, it wasn't all supposed to be in one building.
Well, yeah, except that, I think that, well, I don't know, I don't want to, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't want to mistake the details either, but when it was presented, it all seemed quite plausible.
Yeah, and I think right now they're actually cleaning up that place, and almost all, I think all the buildings are under construction right now. They're not finished, but I think they are.
And then you go over to Autumn Ridge, is there anybody who knows when that will start construction or start anything on that? Have they gotten to that point yet?
No,
I was told October.
They want to start this
Okay.
fall. That's
Okay.
what I've heard, so.
Okay, and then I'll read the plan. I have the plan you gave me, so I'll read the plan. I haven't gotten it.
They were all sorts of TRW.
Okay, I
They had,
think,
yeah, they had an issue with the TWA application.
That's been resolved.
Right, so they've passed that hurdle. It's currently in DEP getting reviewed, so that's their last kind of major thing that's holding them up.
and then all of that senior housing is still on that and everything?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, board members.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
I'll ask if there's any other public that wants to comment. Seeing none, we'll close the public portion of the hearing. And if there aren't any further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Roll call, Beth, please.
Yes. Members Pryor,
Yes.
Leeds,
Yes.
Mayor Menducci.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Fishback.
Yes.
Chairman Van Vliet.
Yes.
Ms. Steinhardt.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, again, John, you have any questions on anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, that's it for audience participation. We'll close that portion of it, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.